Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and improve and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And I am super excited about today's guests, which is Jeff West and Bob Burg. So it's double. You're getting two for the price of one. You know, you're getting both of them. Amazing. And Bob is a dear friend, and he's been on the podcast before. We're going to also have a link to that episode, which is one of our most popular ones. And Jeff, welcome to the podcast. So I'm going to start with introductions, and then I definitely would like you to add anything to it. And we're going to start I have a lot of questions to ask you. So it's going to be a great episode. All right, Jeff. So you coached and led sales team in multiple industries for over 30 years. And you are among the top sales performers and leaders in the nation, which is pretty incredible. That's amazing. And for over 20 years, you've been an entrepreneur in the field sales management with well-known Fortune 500 companies. Now, you and Bob co-authored the best-selling book, Streetwise to Saleswise, and other books. But that's the book we're going to talk about. And that's why we have Bob here as well. And Bob is the author of, and actually, I would say, you know, the developer of the philosophy of the go-giver, which is amazing, right? It's just like, it's a whole philosophy and way of life. Still one of my favorite books. And definitely something, the principles from that book is something I aspire to embrace and act upon every single day. And so you are very inspirational, Bob, and definitely I thank you for that. And I got to know you also on more of a personal level, like in terms of like a friend. I consider you a friend. You know, we have communication back and forth, and you embody it in everything that you do. I mean, that's how you communicate back. That's how you talk. That's how you make people feel important, and you make people feel they're the best version of themselves. So definitely thank you for that.
What a lovely compliment. Thank you. That's so very nice of you. And I was going to say, before you even said that, I was going to say, you already, you know, you're saying you aspire to, you know, with the go-giver, you already embody those principles. So and everyone who knows you knows that.
Thank you. Good. Well, I'm excited. I mean, first of all, any of you, would you like to add anything to the bio to let the listeners know more about you?
No, I'm just honored to be on your show. Thank you so much. And I'm super honored to be here with my good friend, Bob Burg. So.
Yeah, I think Bob is a friend to many people. So it's great to have you here. All right. So let's talk about, I have some questions, and especially we're going to concentrate on the book, you know, Streetwise to Saleswise. So first of all, I'd like to know what led you to actually write that book?
Well, you know, Adi, it was Bob and I have been friends now for more than 20 years, I guess. And we will communicate about sales a lot because that's just who we are, and then how we would explain certain things to people. And fourth quarter of 22, Bob had sent me an email. We were discussing a topic that he was going to be making a post on. And the very last comment he had on his email was, "Oh, and by the way, save this. When we do our book, our parable, this could be a great resource." And we'd never discussed the idea at all at that point. Bob, we've been friends, and I've written other books. And so he knew that was my genre to fit it, obviously. But I answered his question. He had an email. Then I sent that. The last comment I had was, "P.S. Oh, and by the way, if you're serious, oh yes, we're doing this."
That's fantastic. And tell me more about, like, who did you have in mind when you wrote the book? Who did you have in mind when, because I mean, I would assume as an author, I mean, I didn't write like a whole book, but I write articles. I always have an avatar. I always have a person that I want to write for.
Right.
What did you
Oh,
write?
this is a great story, Jeff.
Well, when we were coming up with a concept, of course, we were taking Bob's material on becoming objection-proof, which is the literal best material I've seen in decades when it comes to how salespeople should work effectively when a prospect has an objection. And so as we were coming up with the details, my wife and I were actually sitting in New Orleans. We don't live there. We were passing through, but it was right around New Year's Eve going into 23. And we're on a balcony having dinner. And the waitress who's coming out to take care of us, she said, "Oh, you guys are going to love this." And she pointed down to the street. And we looked, and there was a street busker, a singer getting ready to sing. And we listened to her for about an hour, I suppose. But I looked at my wife and I said, the entire storyline for Streetwise, I think we hadn't titled it at that point, but the book has just come to me. And the characters are based on street performers in New Orleans. It's based a lot on my sales journey, a lot on Bob's sales journey. We just work it into the character. I laugh. Everybody, I think, is kind of an amalgamation in character development, but the leader and the coach, to me, as I'm writing it, Bob's the predominant person I'm thinking of. And then all the mistakes the salesman could possibly make, I was thinking about me.
Amazing. Yeah, and that's one of the things about the books, it's including also Go Giver and this book, that it's written as a really nice, I mean, it's a very fluid story that you enjoy and you want to know what's happening next, and you can totally identify yourself with the characters. It depends on where you are in your career, in your life, but you can identify yourself, and I think everyone can definitely identify themselves with one or more of the characters, right? Or say, well, I don't want to be that, I want to be that one, or whatever it is, but there is this identification, and the storytelling is amazing. So,
you just made my day.
Thank you. Now, the book is about objections, right? So, and one of the concepts that I definitely got to me is that you don't have to fear objections, right? That you don't have to be afraid of objections, that you kind of like almost welcome them, right? Because, if there is no objection, I mean, I can tell you from my experience as well, like why I so agree with you is because, when you don't get objections, that means that the person is not even thinking about it. Because in order for us to actually go through the sales process, we have to be involved. You have to have some kind of emotional involvement, which will involve objections. So what is your take on objections?
Well, the objection-proof process, when Jeff and I say objection-proof, really we're talking about both a philosophy and a methodology that allows the sales professional to work effectively within the objections aspect of the sales process. There are many things we can do to mitigate objections. There are things we can do to keep objections from taking place, and we'll talk about that in a bit in terms of reframing. But really what we can never do is overcome objections. And unfortunately, that's what salespeople have been taught forever, that you've got to overcome objections. The reason why Jeff and I say you can't do that is because you think about it, the word overcome, to overcome someone, you've got to convince them. Well, Dale Carnegie, the master of people skills back in 1936 and How to Win Friends and Influence People, said a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. And as Jeff's and my good friend John David Mann asks, is there any other way to be convinced other than against one's will? Not really. Even take the word convince, the Latin root convincere means to conquer. Now, I think we would all be in agreement that there is not a prospect out there who wants to be conquered by their salesperson, to be told they're wrong, you're wrong, you're right. The ego will take over. They will be so fixed in their position that it doesn't matter if logically you're correct. You're just not going to get past that. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead, Adi.
No, yeah, I want to know about, so just tell us about
Yeah.
your
So what we want to do, and there's also another reason, and that is many times a prospect will give an objection, and the objection they're giving you isn't really the actual objection. It's merely the verbal manifestation of the actual objection. It's not that they're lying. And by the way, if they are, that's a whole different problem. That's a trust issue. So that we're not even talking about that. I mean, they may not feel comfortable with the process. They don't know as much about the process, about the product, the service as you do. It may be their first time ever dealing with that, or it might be their second or third, and they're confused and they don't want to feel ignorant and they don't want to look back. And so what happens is they can sense that there's something amiss, that something's bothering them, but they don't know what it is. But since they don't really know and they can't really ask the right questions, then they sort of just kind of spew out the natural, your price is too high. I've got to think about it. This looks great, but let's do it in a few months. Or I've got to talk to my uncles, neighbors, brothers, cousin three times removed who once did this and bought this and so forth. And so what happens is if you try to overcome objections by giving just the standard answers, if they say this, you say that. If they say this, you say that. What happens? You can give the perfect response to the wrong objection.
Right.
So what Jeff and I say is rather than trying to overcome objections, instead, let's work effectively within the objection and gently, empathetically, tactfully get to the root, the actual objection, and then partner with our prospect to work through that and advance the sales process.
Absolutely. And that is it's a relaxing way of selling. It doesn't stress out the prospect. It doesn't stress out the salesperson. It is partnering, because that is a key word. And I love that. It's
And
collaborative.
Addie, oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. I was going to say, Jeff has come up with some, a wonderful, you were talking about systems earlier, and, I always love that. And Jeff, in his research, after he retired the first time from his very, very successful insurance business, he really came up with a methodology called fusion points, which really helps us to work through this and understand the other person and what's going on in their mind and in their heart.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that system?
Sure, thank you. When it comes to your sales success or your business success, the single most important factor that determines how your future is going to be, how your success is going to be, is not the economy. It's not the political climate. It's not your competition. It's none of those things. The single biggest factor that will influence your success is how the prospects in your market, how your clients, how the people that you're attracting to your team, if you're leading a sales team, how they all make one simple decision when it comes to their relationship with you and your company. Will they persist or will they quit? And so if you understand how that process comes into play, it can be some really valuable information to have, because you can actually influence how a client or a prospect who's never even met you will say yes to that first meeting. You can influence how they'll then become your client and eventual walking ambassador. So there's some really great things that can go on there. And when I began to research how people make that decision, it basically, I'm not going to go through all the science, but it led me to the works of a gentleman. He's a neuroscientist named Dr. Antonio Damasio. And his work was about what happens inside your brain when you make a decision. And what happens is basically your brain, every decision we make is always going to be a combination of logic and emotion. If those two parts of the brain can't communicate, the decision can't get made. And what happens, mechanically speaking, is if we have a negative emotion like mistrust, something's annoying, something's uncomfortable about it, the brain shoots a signal down into our body, and it's called a somatic marker, and it makes a physiological difference in how we feel. We may start getting short of breath. We may get anxious. There's a lot of things going on there. When that happens and it combines with logic, we push back. Prospects don't say yes. People don't say, I want to be part of your team. Nothing works when that's happening. At the same time, though, the opposite is true as well. The first one, when it's negative emotion combining with logic, I call a collision point. But when it's a positive emotion combining with logic, such as a feeling of security, trust, it's love, joy, those kind of things. When that combines with logic, then the brain produces a decision that says, yes, I'm comfortable moving forward with this. And that's what I call a fusion point. And fusion points are that moment in time when logic and positive emotion merge, and it ignites, and it creates loyalty, and it creates camaraderie, it creates persistence, and it's so much fun when you can watch that happen. And it's the beauty of what Bob has been teaching about handling objections for decades, because instead of an objection being a point of contention where you feel like you're in a debate with a prospect and you'll always lose the debate with a prospect, when instead of it being a collision point like that, the process Bob has taught takes that same person, builds a relationship with them, and when you get through working through the objection, you actually built a greater bond with that prospect by how you did it.
Now, you mentioned in the book another term or another principle, I would say, which is framing. So let's talk about that a little bit. Can you explain to the audience what is meant by framing and how do you actually do that?
Yeah, so a frame is so very important. Before even explaining what it is, I'll just say this. It's so important that if you are able to set the proper frame, you're 90% of the way toward the result you want. And if you're not, or if you buy into someone else's negative frame, you're 90% of the way to getting what you don't want. So that's how important a frame is. So what is a frame? Well, a frame is simply the foundation from which everything else evolves. That's why it's so important, because when the frame is correct, everything is from there heading to where you're looking for it to go. Just a very brief example, probably my favorite story. I don't know if I shared it the last time we spoke, Adi, but I talk about the time I was in a Dunkin' Donuts restaurant, and there was a little boy, a little toddler, probably 1, 2, 3 years old, what have you, and he was he had to be more than one, probably 2 or 3 years old, but he was running around the restaurant, and his parents called him over to their table, and as he started to run over, he slipped, he took a spill on the floor. Now he didn't get hurt, but you could tell he was surprised, he was shocked. This was outside the realm of his experience. So what did he do? Right away, he looked at his mom and dad to get their interpretation of the event. What happened. He really was wondering, okay, I don't know if this is good, if this is bad, if I'm supposed to be upset, if I'm so right. And so I'm watching the parents, and I truly believe that had they gotten upset and panicky and rushed over and, oh no, my poor baby, he would have started crying, right? But they handled it just absolutely beautifully. They walked over hurriedly, of course, but they were very calm, very serene. They got down on his level. They looked at him and they smiled, and they even laughed, and they said, oh, what a fun trick. Oh, can you do that again? How fun. Well, the little boy immediately began laughing. Now, what the parents did is they set a productive frame from which he could operate. So rather than having to remedially answer the objections, right, which would be him crying and them saying, oh no, it's okay, you don't have to do it, right? Instead, they set such a wonderful frame that boom, he just had fun with it. Now, we can do the same in any sales conversation. But first of all, and this assumes there's not the know, like, and trust yet. You're meeting for the first time. Obviously, if there's the know, like, and trust, the frame's already set. But let's say in this case, let's use an example, if we may, that we'll use a person in real estate, and this realtor goes in to take the listing, and they can tell the husband and wife are sort of upset a little bit. They're agitated. There was as Jeff would call it, a collision point somewhere, right? The emotions are off. The frame and what they do when they sit down at the table, the first thing either the husband or the wife says to the realtor is, we just want you to know you're the fourth realtor we've seen. all three before you were talking about how great they are, how their company's the best, and they're the only ones we should list with. And we just want you to know we're not some easy to convince mark that you can get right. So they came with what? A negative adversarial frame. Now, they didn't do this consciously. This is totally unconsciously. Now, as the realtor, if you buy into that frame, what happens? Well, you either become defensive, or you become aggressive, or you become scared, or intimidated, or whatever, and it just doesn't work out, or you're in a frame where you're 90% of the way toward the results you don't want. So instead, we need to reframe that. So what if we first control our own emotions? Okay. And what if we now lead with empathy, so we're able to respond instead of react? Then we lead with empathy and understanding, with tact and kindness, and with an ability or with a desire to really understand their feelings. And what if we said something simple such as, "Well, I'm sorry you had to, first, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Mr. and Ms. Prospect. Whether or not I'm the right solution for you, we can't possibly know without exploring deeper and really discovering your needs, your wants, what you're looking to accomplish. So please know our conversation is for all of us to determine that. And if it turns out I'm the right fit, I will be absolutely honored to list your home. But if not, that's also okay."
That's beautiful.
Right. So what you've done is you've reframed this now, right, from an adversarial frame to one of two allies who are, or three allies in this case, who are looking for only one thing: what's best for them. And what's best for them is the only thing they care about.
Right. That makes total sense. And the story about the kid is beautiful because it really emphasized that. Now, here's a question. I know the value proposition is definitely a word is being thrown out there a lot, and it has different people can evaluate, can interpret it in different ways. And you two definitely have your unique way of actually looking at the value proposition, just like anything else. What you do is like you reframe, if we use the same word, you reframe sales, because it's, instead of being pushy and uncomfortable, you reframe it to something that is basically creating a partnership. And really, it's a method of finding what is best for the prospect and helping them gain that, so for their own benefit. I mean, that's really what it is, without convincing or pushing or crush selling or anything like that. So let's talk about your viewpoint of value proposition.
Well, that's such a great question. And one of the ways that as salespeople that we can create these fusion points with a prospect and make them comfortable becoming our customers is exactly how we focus our attention. And when it comes to value proposition, even though every company I've ever heard talk about their value proposition was very well intended, I think it often misses the mark just a little bit. Because the truth is, your value proposition has absolutely nothing to do with your product, nothing to do with your service, nothing to do with your company. It doesn't even have anything to do with how great we are as the salesperson, and I know your audience, everyone is great at what they're doing. A value proposition is 100% about one thing only. It's how does that prospect's life somehow get better, personally or professionally, when they choose to have a relationship with you. So in essence, it's their value from your proposition. And so with everything that you do, whether it's your prospecting process, whether it's your sales conversation, whether it's how you take care of your customer after they become your customer or your client, if all that you're doing is focusing on making sure that they understand their value from your proposition, and then you try everything in your power to make sure they get full value from that, they take fully advantage of it, it sets another fusion point with them, because they don't see you like other salespeople. They don't see you, like you said, being pushy or doing anything that. They see you as someone that's their ally, that they want to work with, because your interest is in helping them.
Absolutely. That's beautifully said. I'm all about processes. I love processes. I love steps. So I would love for either Bob or Jeff to just talk about the 5 steps to handling objections as a pro.
Jeff, you want to take that one?
Oh, sure. You know, we when we were in the book, we actually set a couple of precursors there to get the salesperson ready for that conversation. Number one is what Bob has already talked about. Never try to overcome an objection. Number two is when you have a lot, you're within the first couple of weeks that you're out there in the field of sales, you're going to hear a lot of your objections. You're going to hear them all pretty much, 90% of them anyway. And so if there's a common objection that you get, we always encourage people handle that during the actual sales conversation itself, along with a solution. Because if you do it there, if you bring up the exact same point there and the solution to that point, it's education. But if you wait until after the fact and then your prospect brings it up, it's an objection and you have to handle it. You have to work with it a little bit differently. But the steps basically in becoming objection proof is number one is to control your own emotions. You know, as a salesperson, when someone gives us an objection, the first thing we want to do is we actually have a little collision point in our own body. Our negative emotion will kick off, and it's that fear of loss. I need to make this sale. I got a family to feed, all of those things. So when that combines with that negative emotion combines with logic, we have a little collision point inside. So step one is to control your own emotions. If you respond or you react based on how that feels, you'll find your prospect's going to mirror it back, and then it's getting into a defensive situation. You don't want to do that. So that's the first step. The second step is to show empathy, empathize with them. Let them know that even if you don't understand exactly what they're feeling, you know they're feeling something and it's important to them. And when you show empathy, you're basically saying, you know, I give your opinion value. You know, that's certainly something worth considering. I get how you'd want to see that or want to think about that. So that's the second step. The third step is ask some questions, dig a little deeper. You want to make sure you understand their perspective. And one of the easiest ways to do that is just to simply say, you know, I want to make sure that I really understand how you're thinking about this. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit? Tell me exactly what that means. Because one of the keys that Bob has so well pointed out for a long time is that initial objection may not be the real one, like he talked about earlier. When you ask these questions, it also gets them digging a little deeper and they'll discuss things, and then you can really often uncover that. And when you've controlled your own emotions and you've shown empathy, and then you've asked questions so that you really do get a better understanding of what they have, it gives you then the ability to reframe it. It gives the prospect mentally will relax and listen to what you're saying, and they will give you the mental permission to slightly shift their perspective. And that's where you can offer your solutions along with social proof. And so that they can say, it's not just you saying that you can do that, other people are saying it as well. And then of course, the last thing is to kind of isolate that objection and just ask them, other than that, is there any other thing that you can see that will keep you from moving forward with this? And just that simple process, you've gone from their thinking, if they don't know you, they're thinking that you're going to be, you know, it's that relationship between a prospect and a salesperson. They're going to think there's going to be a little push back and forth there. But when you handle it this way, you totally take that off the table. You're building a relationship with them. You're creating one heck of a fusion point just in how you worked with them during that process. And of course, finally, you close the sale. By the way, for your audience, my favorite way to close a sale is to get them to say no. People laugh when I talk about that, but people naturally, I think, like to tell salespeople no. At least that's the way I felt early on in my career. So my favorite way to get a sale to close is to say, do you see any reason that you wouldn't want to move forward with this? Well, no. So I just like how it works.
There's a yes or the no. That's good. Now, what about how do you take if, let's say, a prospect goes, well, you know, I can't make up I mean, I have to talk to such and such, or I have to talk to my wife, I have to talk to my husband, I have to wait, I have to, you know, talk to my advisor, I have to, just like Bob was saying, like, you know, to my former roommate in college that I haven't seen for 40 years, I have to talk to their neighbor, whatever it is, right? What do you say to that?
So, you know, there's a good chance, and let's take this from a couple of different outlooks.
Okay.
There's a good chance, first of all, that if they say that you simply have not done the proper job in building sufficient value. Because it comes down to this, and this is just a very simple law of economics. People will exchange their money for that which they believe is of greater value than the money they're exchanging it for. So by the very end of the sales conversation, if they see the value as being here and the price as being here, and by the way, I should say cost, because that can include price, but it could also, there are other costs. There's aside from financial costs, which
The
is price.
investment. I like to call it the investment.
Right. No, but I'm saying when they say if their cost is here, okay,
Right.
and their cost might be, I'm talking about in their mind, their cost could be financial, but their cost could also be lost opportunity. Their cost could be aggravation. Their cost could be time. Their cost could, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
totally.
if they
Yeah.
see the cost of doing business with you here and the value here, they're going to say no. If they see their cost of doing business with you here and the value here, they're going to say yes, right? So if you've gone through the entire sales conversation correctly, as Jeff went through, then by the time you ask for the order, remember, you have done the discovery. You understand what it is they need, want, and desire. You've been able to answer the usual objections that come up in such a way that they feel satisfied with that. And you've been able to clarify, you've been able to do all the things until finally, when you connect the benefits of your product or service with what they need, want, and desire, by the time you get to asking that question at the end, they're simply saying yes, or in Jeff's case, no. They're simply agreeing to do something they have already told you they want to do. So at that point, there shouldn't be that, thing. However, there still is sometimes, okay? And let's just say that, yes, you've done a wonderful job, okay? And they still, because they're human, and humans do have an issue with making a commitment, they say, I need to, so forth and so on. Okay, let's take a situation where you're a business coach. And this is where, again, you want to make sure to handle this before it ever comes up. So if it does come up, you're prepared for it. Let's say you're a business coach. You're talking to somebody who, in your discovery, you found that they have an issue in the way they run their business, that if they don't correct this, they are heading on a downward spiral. They tell you this, and you ask a question early in the conversation. Okay, first you ask, if my coaching was able to provide you with exactly what you want, what would things look like 6 months from now? Okay, and they tell you, now they're telling you, and this is what Jeff calls, they're telling you what they need to hear. So you're not telling them what they need to hear. They're telling you what they need to hear. Okay, and so now you ask another question, and that is, now let's look at it from the opposite track. If you did not take action, again, this is early in the conversation. If you did not take action, if things stayed the same in your business as they are now, what does that look like 6 months from now? And now they paint a picture of everything they don't want their business to be. Okay, so now we get to the end and we ask the question, and they say, this is great. I mean, I love everything you've told me. I know you can help. You're so worth the investment, and I want to do this. But I'd like to put this off maybe and start 3 months from now, 4 months from now. Would that be okay? Now the first thing you do is, again, you control your own emotions. Okay, you utilize empathy, and you say, it's always, making a decision to invest money in anything is always difficult, and it's always something that's good to really consider before you do it. Now, earlier when we were chatting at the beginning, aside from telling me what you wanted the business to look like if this coaching was very successful for you, you also sort of painted a picture of what it would look like 6 months from now if we didn't. Okay, so let me ask you, what do you think the best decision for you would be? Would it be to get started and make the investment right now and moving your business to where you're looking for it to be? Or would it maybe be waiting 6 months, which is an option, and then, having to then take your business, which is now in a place you don't want, and having to rebuild?
Right. Yeah. And let's say they say, you know what, it sounds great. You're absolutely right. But I always slip on my decisions, slip on it before I make a decision.
Okay. So there's a place to go here, and we're not going to go too far with it, but we're going to go a little bit further. Okay. And say, first you always congratulate them on the thing. That's fine. I think what it is, you want to make sure you're making the right decision and you're making this decision based on logic, right? And they say, yeah. And so tonight when you're sleeping on it, and what I'm thinking what you mean instead of sleeping on it is you really want to give it some great thought. And you want to really consider every element of this. So let me ask you, if I may, as you're thinking about this tonight, what are the top 3 questions that you have? Boom.
Right.
Now they're going to, right? And now they're going to give you the 3 questions, which now you can answer. And now you can, again, go with the sale. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, Adi, in the insurance industry that I was in, they were like 3 different levels that we were selling. Employers, number one, the business owner, the employer would have to make the decision, yes, we could work with their employees. And then the employees had to make the decision, yes, they were signing up. So there was 2 different kind of sales processes there. But sometimes we would find ourselves in a situation where it was a larger company and we had to go through some corporate structure to even get to that point. And so we would find ourselves at times having to present to a decision influencer. Now, traditional sales training says never do that, only present to a decision maker. But the truth is that wasn't always an option in our industry. And so what I learned to do was a little process, and it became very funny. And when it would happen, people would enjoy it with me when I would be working with them. Now, I always say, when you're making a presentation with a decision influencer who can't really say yes to you yet, make sure you treat them with the same respect that you would as if they were the final decision maker, because they may not be able to say yes, but they can say no. And so, but what I would do is I'd do a process. Number one, I would take them off the hook. Number 2, I would give them a promotion. And then number 3, I would go to work with them. And so the first part about taking them off the hook, I would say, look, I already know from what you told me earlier, you can't be the one to make the final decision to move forward with this. And I want you to know that's perfectly okay. I don't expect you to do that. But I would like to ask you a couple of questions. First off, do you mind if I give you a promotion? I'm going to now make you owner of the company. And then I would laugh and they would laugh and say, but the truth is, don't get too excited, because an imaginary promotion also comes with only an imaginary pay raise. And they would laugh. And I'd say, but I do want to ask you a question, thinking of it from that perspective. And I want you to feel completely comfortable telling me no if that's the right decision for you, okay? And get their agreement. And I'd say, if the final decision were in fact yours and yours alone, would we be moving forward with this? Do you see any reason you wouldn't want to move forward with this? And if they've got an objection they haven't voiced, it's going to come out right there and give you the opportunity to work with them on that. And then after they say, well, no, I would be doing this, say, well, great. Now I'm going to go to work for you. And they'd laugh and I would say, well, here's what I'll do. Rather than you having to learn everything I just presented to you and everything we just discussed, I'll come in. Let's get a meeting on the calendar with whoever you have to go to next. I'll come back. I'll handle that conversation. I'll answer any questions. And if you want me to, I'll leave and you guys can make your decision in private. That's not important. What's important is that I do the work for you instead of you doing it. Does that sound like a good idea? And they would say yes, and we get the meeting on the calendar.
I think it's beautiful. And I think one of the things that I learned now from both of you is that sometimes, and a sales can be going through multiple people, because if that's the way that they are actually making decisions, it's fine, because sometimes you have to go to one person, even if it's the owner, they have a board of advisors, and that's the way,
Right.
That's their sales process. They have to go to their board of advisors, or they have to present it to the leadership team, because for some reason they feel like they need to have it by agreement by everyone. But what I learned from both of you is that any step of the process before moving to the next one has to be a close. Meaning, if let's say you talk to the founder and they say, well, I need to go and talk to my leadership team, you can say, okay, well, let's say this is a dictatorship, not a democracy, and it was up to you. Would you move forward?
Right.
And then you press them to say yes or no, because if they say no, so there are still objections that they cannot really present to the leadership team, right? I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I might do, rather than press them for that decision, I just might make them comfortable sharing with me the decision.
Yeah.
If, and you do that by taking them off the hook. If you start, I'm going to ask you a question, but please feel completely welcome to tell me no if that's the right decision for you. But if the final decision on this were yours and yours alone, do you see any reason we wouldn't be moving forward? Then you're going to make them comfortable with giving you that information, and they won't feel like you pressured them or pressed them to do so.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and there were two aspects. So when I was answering the question about the person, the coaching client, that is that would really, although it's a business to business, it was really more of a business to consumer type of thing, because that person was the decision maker, and it was simply a matter of the wanting to think it over because of not wanting to make a commitment. With Jeff's, it was a business to business type of thing, where or a complex sale, enterprise sale, what have you, where there are many moving parts. So as we see, we've got to take every situation. It's not a one size fits all. There are principles that apply to every situation, but it's never a one size fits all in terms of in terms of that particular situation.
Right. So it's okay. So I'm going to summarize what I learned is basically, and you're right, it is basically making them feel comfortable answering. It's getting answers where both parties actually have a full understanding. They understand the frame of where things are at. And you make it comfortable. You can say no to me, but I'm curious. So I have a question. And this is not in any way, making a commitment. But if it was just up to you to make the final decision, do you see any reason why not to move forward? And you make it very comfortable for them to actually answer. But that needs to be, in order to finalize each step before moving to the next one, you have to know what the answer is, or you want to, because otherwise there is really no collaboration or partnership, because you don't really know what the other person is thinking and where things are at. Yeah, that's very smart. And asking enough questions because you're curious and interested. And again, keeping in mind that all you want to do is help them. But what is stopping them from making the decision? I mean, is there any other information you can offer, or how can you help them? Now,
you often find that they'll when they do that meeting with whoever they have to go to, they'll want to bring you in, which is so much more in your favor, because we know what we do. We're the best at discussing that and the best at answering questions about that. And so rather than someone else that you really don't know how they'll be handling the conversation, that makes it much better for you.
Yeah, they know enough to buy from you. They don't know enough to how to sell your
product. Because if you have to present it to somebody else, it's hard. Absolutely. Yes, definitely. Now, how do you handle an objection? And I know we went a little bit over time, but this conversation is amazing. I'm sure our listeners are like, okay, I want to know more. How do you handle an objection of, I need to speak to whomever, let's say, you talk to a decision maker, but they have other trusted advisors. I need to talk to my CPA. I need to talk to my lawyer. I promise them that, I have like 5 other coaches, and I have to ask the opinion of each and every one of them.
So Adi, there's a couple things here. So if we get caught with something like that at the end once, we should never get caught with that again. What it says to us is we've got to determine before we really get deep into the sales conversation who else is in on the decision-making process. Zig Ziglar had an absolutely beautiful way of asking that question. Instead of, if he suspected for a minute that that person wasn't the total decision maker, rather than saying, who really is the decision maker, right? Of course, you're going to destroy the person's ego and you're going to be out of, he would say in his, wonderful way that Zig would say it, aside from you, who else will be in on the decision-making process? So you want to get that beforehand. Then, as Jeff said, if the answer is so-and-so, the first thing you want to do is try to get them all there. If you cannot, well, then you've got to be able to frame everything in such a way that, even receive a commitment from that person that should they decide to go ahead with this, that you would then need to set up a second meeting where you can have them in front of their board of advisors or what have you.
That's exactly right. And then use Jeff's point of like, I'm going to help you, I'm going to do the job for you. And, I can come and present, and present it in such a way that you're actually helping them because you already established that there is no other reason for them not to close because they want to do it, but now they have to present. So you're going to present the right way in order to help them get what they want. And you really frame it in such a way that you all work together.
And remember too, that this person who tells you at the beginning that they need to, they're letting you know in advance that they need to talk to 5 other people, that can disappear.
Right. That
Okay.
can be an objection by itself.
Right. That can disappear because when they really feel at the end as though the value they're receiving from you is here and the cost of doing business with you is here, they all of a sudden don't need to talk to those 5 people.
But what about the ego? Because sometimes people say, yeah, I need to talk to 5 at the beginning. And then at the end, I really want to do it. But
No. Here's what happens though. Okay. Because you didn't make them defensive about it, they don't need to defend themselves.
Yeah.
You don't bring it up. You don't even have to bring it up.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. Like I can talk, well, I have to, before I buy this, I have to talk to my husband. And at the end, I go like, you know what? I mean, I'm sure he's going to agree anyway. So let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Because you make me feel comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And this goes back to what Jeff was saying earlier, that so long as we take the pressure off them, see, autonomy is one of the biggest drivers in human nature. We all want to feel as though we are in control of our destiny, as though the decision is ours. So to the degree that we can give that person what we call the law of the out or back door, which says the bigger the out or back door we give someone to take, the less they'll feel the need to take it. That's really the direction we want to go.
That is so true. Oh my gosh, we can talk for another 2 hours, but what I would suggest to our listeners, all of them right now, go and get the book Streetwise to Saleswise, because all of that information is there, and then go and apply it. Now, Jeff and Bob, if people read the book and they want to know more and they need more help, what help do you provide in terms of getting them to be the best salespeople that they can be?
Well, Jeff has a wonderful, wonderful newsletter he sends out, which is basically on Fusion Point. So if you go to jeffcwest.com, it's right on the left-hand side, right, just scroll down a tad, and it's going to say Fusion Point. Well, Jeff, what's the name? Fusion Points
Unleashed newsletters.
And it is
I'm
absolutely,
looking at it right now. Absolutely. So
it's a not miss. And I'm not saying because we're like best buddies. I'm saying it because it is just wow. It's an absolute must read.
Absolutely. So it's, you scroll down, it's right there. You can subscribe. And there's a great picture there of New Orleans with the story. So it aligns with the story you just told me. It's beautiful. So you should go to that website. And what about you, Bob?
Burg.com. So easy. Just spell Burg correctly, BURG.com, and you can subscribe to my daily impact newsletter. And of course, Jeff and I, along with our dear friend Kim Angeli, hold a Saleswise live sales mastery conference. So go to saleswiselive.com and consider going to that and bringing your team. It's 2 just fantastic days of learning.
Absolutely. So you just had one, which was very successful.
Oh, yeah, so fun.
Totally. And when is the next one?
It is in September.
September 22nd through the 24th.
Yeah.
Okay. And where would it be held?
Ooh, at the beautiful, beautiful, luxurious Ben Hotel. It's called an Autograph Collection because it's so beautiful. In downtown West Palm Beach, right on the Intercoastal, across from Palm Beach Island. Quick walk to the ocean. It's just, and it's so interesting that the hotel itself, Jeff, they were so good. The whole experience they provided that it became part of our entire experience, was provided. They were fantastic.
Absolutely.
The people who were there just loved that. And the view from the meeting room, you can see the Intercoastal, you can see yachts, you can see Palm Beach Island, and you can see the Atlantic all from the meeting room, which made it a little hard to keep their attention. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
They paid great attention.
We were going to pull the shade down,
I don't know. But both of you on stage will definitely, this sounds amazing, but both of you there talking, it's the value, like you were saying, Bob. So it's kind of like, here's the value.
You remember Richard Wileman, right? Remember you interviewed Richard?
Yeah, I did.
He's going to be Kim's, Jeff's, and my special guest. He's going to be presenting from stage.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
if you go to saleswiselive.com, you'll see it says Richard Wileman, special guest speaker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so listeners, buy the book, read it. I mean, listen to it. I mean, I listen to it on Audible, but listen, read, whatever, and sign up for this conference because it's amazing. And Jeff and Bob, I can't thank you enough for being guests on this podcast. This is an amazing episode that I'm sure it's going to be like, if not the top, one of the tops. It's going to compete with yours, Bob, like which one would be. And thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners are like, wow. And thank you. Thank you for being guests.
It's an honor.
Thank you as always, Addie. You're just wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.